I'm going to double load my number 4 or 6 filbert with my Perfect Perry and Twilight. Then I dipped my Perfect Perry side of the brush into our Grecian blue. I've got my circles for my daisies. So I'm going to start. Now your petal's going to be however hard you press. That's the size. It determines. So I've got my brush on the side with the color that I'm putting down is my Twilight. I'm going to reload as needed. When you first load, of course, there's not very much there. And I'm going to come along. I pull towards with the dark down. There. So however many petals you want, pull that inwards. Reloading. And it just depends how much you pick up of each color. Now this flower is going to overlap that flower. So you always want to put the flowers that are in the background first. And you don't have to do next to each other, the petals. If you move them around and rotate them, it ends up looking a little bit more natural, and it stops you from getting that kind of pinwheel effect that it's easy to get. I'll turn my can, and I'm going to apply another one here. Now I haven't got my center there, but so I'm going to apply that right here. I'm going to go like so. So then what I'm wanting to do is have this flower going that direction. I'm going to take and give my brush a wipe off, get all those colors off. I double load again, Perfect Perry and Twilight. And then on top of the Twilight, I dip into the Grecian blue. Whoops, here we go. Okay, so are you able to see where I'm going? This one, it's press, pull, lift. Press, pull, lift. And I have my brush on the side. I'm going to reload. Twilight, Perfect Perry. And I'm actually going to have to top up my little puddle of Grecian blue. This Grecian blue is just beautiful. Oh, more of it showed up there for me. Now, because we're freehanding these, we can fill them in as much as we'd like. And then I want to do a couple of little buds. So let's say we're going to have a little bit of a bud here. So I'll just go like that. Let's put one. Okay, let me see what I've got here for you. So there's my little bud there. And then I'm going to be putting a couple of them over here. So that, again, I had to top up my Twilight, Perfect Perry, Grecian blue. And if we want to have a center to come for, and then we'll do another one there. So that's my dark side of my brush. You see I've got paint all over. Dark, down. I have the brush on the side. I like doing my daisies and little pulled petals this way. And then we've got this flower. So he's going to end up being the one that's overlapping. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing there. I'll have to turn the can up for you. petal coming from here. Pull, press, pull, press, pull, press, pull. And I think I'd like to add a couple more. There. So we'll be putting our centers in, and let me look and see how it goes. Do I need to have a couple more buds? Yeah, I think I could go for a bud here. I know I'm going to add more leaves, and I think we could take a bud here. Yeah, I like the shape of that. There. So that looks pretty. Now we're going to end up going for, I'll transfer the lines on my other flowers and base coat the leaves in, and we'll be ready to shade on the other flowers. I'm going to be using my 3/8 flat shader, and I'm going to shade around my leaves on the door using raw umber. We want to walk that out. Would have been easier for me to have you shade before I put this on. And then I can come back and shade at a bit too much water there. Kind of by some of these twisted marks that I have. So it just gives some depth to some of these marks. Then I'm going to come back with at least a 1/2 inch. You can use 5/8 even if you want, but at least a 1/2 inch and shade on my door. And I'm going to use raw umber to shade the door as well. And this is just going to tie everything together so it looks more like a little fairy door in the woods. And I'll shade along the bottom of my door as well. Now when you're up here and you're shading, you can give it a little wiggle. See how if I come back here and I just, it's going to kind of bleed down some little shading marks. And I'll come back and do a little of that along the bottom as well. So you see those little streak marks that are coming down? They kind of add to the little bit of woodsy look to it. Okay, so we're going to shade down the middle of our leaves now that we've shaded the bottoms of them all. So we're going to be splitting them. So I've gone ahead and done that on the other leaves. So I can show you that we're next going to take our 1/4 or number 8, and we're going to shade or float our highlight. So I've mixed our highlight to find the color I wanted to use, and I'll just come on these little ones here to start with, because I'm going to be coming up the side. Any leaf that overlaps another leaf has to have a highlight on it, right? That's how we know where to put that. We want to lift that leaf that's on top. I'm just going to get that off of the edge there. So we want to lift this leaf See how it now becomes on top of this one. Once we have those on there, we can take our liner with our thinned avocado, pull a vein up the middle if your shade isn't as strong as you'd like it, and bring our thin, fine, which these are not thinned enough. There we go. Bring some nice fine highlights up the middle of our leaves. And then I'll just, using my liner, take my highlight mix and just pop up here and there, just a little. You're not outlining it. I just like to add a little swipe here and there. And then once we've got that all on, we're going to float to strengthen between our leaves, black green, and behind our petals. This will make our petals pop up. So it's the black green float along the bottom that's going to strengthen up and separate. So I'm just going to come back. There we go, a little stronger. And that just pushes the leaves back and lets our flower pop forward. Alrighty. I'm going to take Twilight and I'm going to, nice and softly, just random, okay, strengthen in behind our petals. And if a flower overlaps another, I'll overlap there, shade there too. So what I'm talking about is just, and you see that I go with just a little jagged float. Brush is side loaded, but I'm not necessarily using the brush and kind of shading all the way around. We are shading where we want to separate. So like here, I will float right there. But where I want to add a little dark in behind the stippled area, it's more of a little jab. See, we have a petal that's tucked in here. I can come in and add a little strength behind there as well. Same thing on our buds. If we want to separate our buds from each other, it's like this one. We can just float a little bit in behind. It's not a has to be. It's more of just another little detail that pops everything up. And again, where petals overlap each other, just adds a bit more depth. You can see that guy, I didn't do the shading in around him. And it makes a difference. It helps our center pop out. And I want to come with my stylus and add some tiny little antique gold pollen dots around the outer edge of my center stippling with a very tiny stylus. I want to use a very tiny stylus to do that. There. So that's some shading in there. And then I'm going to grab a nice tiny stylus, antique gold, and this is where I'm talking about. And we're just, here, I'll come up here where it's a little easier to see. So this is the same color, right? We're not adding another color into there. And you see how they pop out nicely now with that little bit of shading in the background. Okay. But we want a tiny little dot. We're not looking for big pollen. So whenever you do load your, see how I'll start by stippling on here so that my heaviest part will be unloaded there and the tiny little bits can come off the end. All right, so I'll continue with the rest of those. Now I've decided that I'm coming in and I'm going to add a few moon yellow highlight dots just along the top where our piece is highlighted on the top of our and that really pops it up and goes so nicely with the blues. Okay, so that's in our centers. We're going to add some vibrant little glue baby's breath dots. And this is in our Grecian blue. And we'll just come and add some kind of coming away, bringing our eye away. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of our gingham blue. Some will end up on top of the others. Some will end up beside it. We just want to have a nice and airy, wispy little blue pulling our eyes out. Some can be on the leaves, some can be on the flowers. It just adds to the piece, making it a little bit more fairy-like. I'm going to start my shading on my large buds with dioxazine purple and my 3/8 shader. And we're going to walk these out all the way along. This is going to create the shape to our bud. Trying to keep it tipped up so that and we'll shade inside where our petals are overlapped. Now, if you don't feel comfortable walking them up, we can come back after and dry brush to create a little bit more strength. These petals are coming from behind each other. And then the back petal is one great big petal. There. I'm going to take and I'm going to float with my number 4, and I'm going to be using Wisteria, perfect little highlight color. So you saw when I started shading, I shade from the bottom up, and now, because I don't want to cross over where I've been, now I start from the top and come down. So I used my number 4 to do those highlights. And I'll switch out. Who knows where I put brushes around here? There we go. I'm into my number 8 or 3/8, it won't matter, to do the larger petal on the front. And I sort of give it a little bit of a wiggle, just to add some depth. That one can be a little stronger there. There. And we can pull some fine lines. I'm going to touch into both. Now these could be put on after my strengthening shading, and I'm going to turn it upside down. It's always better to pull towards yourself. And thin that down. And when I talk about strengthening shadow, we're going to come in with Twilight, which is, I've mixed Twilight. I picked up both brush, mixed Twilight and Dioxazine to float, or pardon me, to create these little tiny fine lines on here. So I dried the lines, and now I'm going to shade along the bottom of the flower to strengthen. This is our strengthening. Get that off the edge of my petal. You see that strengthening, how it just pops the shading up. Come in here a little. And there will be a little bit coming out of here with some stamens. I don't have to paint the center like I did on the other one, but a little bit of stamens coming out. And that's going to be some raw sienna, some antique gold, and a little bit of bittersweet. Then we switch out to the stylus. I start off with the larger dots in raw sienna. Then I'll put some dots in the bittersweet, closer to the bottom. Switch to the smallest stylus and continue with antique gold. Now the antique gold pops out quite nicely. And I'm going to finish off with a few, not too much, of moon yellow. All right. We're going to pop up our highlight on the flower petals, the big ones. I'm just coming in here with a little mixture, and we can use our liner after too to crisp a few spots. But this is a mixture of blue chiffon and wisteria. So it's just a little brighter than what we did originally. Sometimes it's just feels afterwards that we could have it a little bit brighter. And then the whole thing with this is it's not necessarily going to, I wouldn't do it always like I did right now. I think I popped that in earlier. So in the pattern, I am going to have it in first once we do the first one. And then I'm just going to pull a few lines. And just, you see how if I just crisp the odd little outside line, it's not an outline. We're not outlining it. We just pop it up here and there. You see that little directional pull makes a difference as well. All right. I'm also going to float a highlight just on the few petals. It doesn't have to be everywhere. And this is Grecian blue, just a little here and there on some of these. Let me just blot that a bit. Some of these daisy petals. Once I put just the Grecian on them, then I'm going to come back. Gosh, I'm sorry about that. Wasn't hitting that too often. So I just come in, strengthen the tips on some of these petals. And then I've got a mix of the Grecian with a little bit of the gingham. So it's just that little bit brighter. You see how I'll just pop that in a few of the spots. I'm not going as far as I did with the Grecian. Just to pop up another little bit. And this isn't necessary. If you don't want to do this part, you're done with all the extra little tidbits on here, that's all fine. It's the same thing. I would like to add a little bit of, let's go for dioxazine purple. Just nice and thin. And I'm just going to add a little bit of a tint on a couple leaves, just to bring a tint. And it just pulls a little bit more purple around our picture. Nice and thin. We're not looking for a lot. We just want to have, let's put a little over here now. There. Couple. There. I'm going to shade, and again with the black brown, nice and soft, in behind our flowers, along the back of our door frame. Okay. All the way along here. Okay, and that just strengthens up that window. I'm taking my zero round and I put the first coat of bittersweet across, and now I'll come down. I did bittersweet, and now I've picked up a little bit of pebble, dirty brush, so it's just going to highlight on it. I still want to see the bittersweet. And then I'm just going to scuff, whoops, a little scratch in the middle. This is my, I'm sure I've got that camera just a-bouncing on you. This is burlap, and it's just that little bit of highlight scratch in the middle. Cleaning off my brush, and then I'm going to do the outside trim on the window. Same thing, a little heavier, a little wider stick trim. And I got you bouncing again. No happy medium if I'm trying to bring this in here. I never really like the zoom in. It never seems to give it as clear. Okay, so that's bittersweet dirty brush. And now the pebble. Like I say, it's still on a dirty brush. And then I'll pick up a little bit of the burlap. And I'm just going to swipe here and there, not everywhere. Got like a little, on my highlights. And I'm going to come back with a little bit of that burlap dirty brush and just add a bit more highlight back on our logs inside here. It just picks it up a little bit. And a little bit more, I'm just a thinned out, kind of nice and washy. Back over that side part to the door, just to strengthen up that shadow. And this side is just a fine line. And I think I'm going to add a couple more. You know, when we, in the very beginning, we added the lines coming through where I mixed, picked up and brush mixed desert turquoise and bittersweet. And we did those lines. I'd like a few shorter ones as well. So I'm just thinning down a little bit of that brush mix. And I'll bring it up a little bit, down, just to add a little more wood grainy line in here. See the difference from one side to the next? Yeah, that helps. Just a little more wood grainy. Okay, that looks pretty good.